Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis. I'm here with my co-host Chris. This is the first episode of the Corona Time podcast. We're going to be reviewing both TV shows and films. This week, the film that we will be reviewing is Primer. But we just want to give you all a little bit of background about ourselves as the host of the show. So I am a graduate student in North Carolina. I'm originally from California. I don't have any technical sort of experience reviewing any sort of visual media, that being TV series or films. Both myself and my co-host here, we are just both pretty avid, like I would say, TV and film buffs, and so we just we talk about in our personal lives different shows and films that we watch, and we figured we'd just sort of give our takes as a sort of average viewer on certain shows that we find interesting or that make it recommended down along the line. Chris, do you want to give some background about yourself?
Yeah. Alexis already introduced me. So in a sense, my name's Chris. And I'm a software engineer. I actually live in New Jersey, but I work in New York City. I was actually born and raised in California, San Jose. And, hobbyist. I've been probably watching movies, TV shows since I was a kid. And, I've been, dissecting. Like, I feel I'm a hobbyist. Like, I read articles analyzing movies and stuff. But I don't have any film studies background at any university level. But some of the best directors didn't go to film school or dropped out. So who says my opinion doesn't matter? So.
Yeah, that's true. And we figured we'd give sort of an outside perspective from the traditional film reviewers. Anybody from that background. So anyway, for this week, as our first episode, we decided to review the film Primer. We're just gonna start off by giving a little bit of background about the film. It was a 2004 film, so a little bit back, about 16 years. It was made on a $7,000 budget, and it's a sort of cult indie film, so it's got a huge following amongst its fan base, but it never really picked up on the mainstream, again, because it was sort of has an indie film feel, that being on, like I said earlier, a $7,000 budget. But it's got a pretty interesting topic in dealing with time travel and how it sort of presents that throughout the film. You want to go ahead and give some more detail on it?
Yeah, actually, I actually got to listen to the director's commentary on the film. And actually what was even more impressive, other than the budget, actually, was that he edited it and did the sound mixing himself. So what I didn't realize was that a lot of the scenes, and it's to his credit, the director's credit, that it's a lot of scenes are actually dubbed. If you didn't know, the original audio is not there that was shot. Some scenes have the original audio, and he pointed that out. But for the most part, he dubbed all the lines. And the one thing he did admit was that the problem with dubbing is that if you do it a lot, you can tell as a director, as an artist, that it's not the authentic sound that you get on set. And that was one of his pet peeves on himself, and also some shots that he actually did. It was great to hear that director's commentary, which we'll get more into as we continue talking about the film, because he seems like a really down to earth, it was his first film and he knew there was a lot of mistakes, but I appreciate the ambition and just his vision of the film and stuff. So.
Yeah, so I personally did not watch the director's commentary on his film, but this was his debut film, which was pretty impressive. I thought he did actually a very good job in sort of the direction and structure of the film itself. And he definitely, I wouldn't say it's quite a film for your average viewer, because there's a lot of technical background that you sort of need to understand some of the concepts of the film. And the director himself actually went to engineering school in Texas. And so he was, he claimed, or throughout the filmmaking process, he used a lot of his technical background to sort of guide a lot of the story writing. And so if you don't have any sort of engineering or scientific background, it might not be within your wheelhouse, so to say, because it is a very confusing film at times.
Yeah, what I will say is that in the director's commentary, he does say that the science is important because he wanted to tackle time travel. It's funny, he talked about how he watched the Back to the Future, and he liked those movies, but the time travel didn't always make sense to him, some of the paradoxes and stuff. And he, wanted to take a little more scientific approach and actually like have everything kind of like nuts and bolts explained. But he does say that to really understand what he was trying to, say in the movie, you don't like have to actually like understand every, detail of like what the jargon they were using. He even admits that like in the script that he wrote actually at a public library, which is funny, that like he he admits that like he actually had the actors like speed up their lines so that because every minute was important for him, but like it was just to just make them sound smarter too. So
Right. No, I mean that totally comes across throughout many of the sequences of the film. One thing that I really liked about the film is, and I know that was a point of emphasis for the director himself, was to show that a lot of the breakthroughs that occur through any science or engineering, they occur sort of incrementally. So I really appreciated in the introduction scenes how it was like four engineers were just gathered around in a garage, just trying to play around and try to tinker with certain aspects of a design or idea that they had. And really, since both my co-hosts and I, we're both from San Jose, California, which is a really tech and semiconductor centered, a lot of the success stories for companies around that area really originated and started from an idea within the garage. And that was consistent throughout the stories of, I can think of a couple companies like Adobe and HP. It was really sort of that, ground up approach where they were just fiddling around in their spare time in the garage with a concept or idea. And little by little, they were able to develop a company and actually develop some sort of technology. But that didn't just happen overnight, which is, I believe, a big part of what this film was trying to convey as well.
yeah, it's I think I think you're right, because I think we often try to idealize, Bill Gates or Zuckerberg or Musk, but really, they're special individuals, but really they also have built upon the past, right? So like you can't build the Apple II if semiconductor chips aren't available to do that, or chips aren't like being able to be manufactured to do that. You can't build Google if there's no internet, right? So we like to, praise these, companies or individuals, but often they're building on the knowledge of the past to, innovate for the future. So.
Yeah, that technology that they are built upon, it didn't just happen over time. I mean, even the idea of the transistor, I think it occurred in New Jersey. I could be mistaken. But yeah, that was, I believe, I can't remember exactly what the laboratory that it came out of.
Bell Labs.
There you go. And that's why you're living in New Jersey now. But yeah, even the technology of the transistor, that took quite a bit of time, and that was not a very, very quick development.
Yeah, and actually, to your point, if you really think about, you want to go like deep into the origin. Like, if you think, I think his name was George Bull, but like the logic gates and stuff, that was where it really started, right? The transistor got its basis from mathematics, so
right.
It was just applied in the end. So
yeah, so it was cool. I really liked how they sort of approached that at the beginning of the film. They sort of introduced the four characters. The two predominant main characters are Abe and Aaron, and there are two other engineers, but they sort of have a falling out, which we'll get into later in the podcast. But really, it focuses on sort of they're sort of unhappy with their engineering lives, and so they're really trying to start a company. But there's a lot of disagreement amongst the direction with which they want to go in pursuing their ideas, which I think is probably pretty accurate in terms of how a lot of companies sort of develop in the early stages, how a lot of people sort of get edged out, or their ideas do anyway.
Yeah, I think I mean, now we're going to get into the film a bit. So, but yeah, in the beginning, you can see that like they all have the same high level goal. Like they all want to build a company. They want to be, revolutionary engineers, but, they all have different probably kind of methods and philosophies to get there. Right. And you can see that Aaron and Abe, they're closer knit. And so they're kind of more aligned, at least initially in the movie. Right. We'll get into it later. But
Sure.
And the other two are, they're on the other side, right? They have their own thoughts and ideas. And what's interesting about the movie is that like it's not really explicitly defined to you what the difference of ideas were, but you can just get the sense of the disagreement and like the division.
Yeah, I mean it's been pretty well stated for a lot of sort of like public companies that have been in the spotlight, even in our lives. You could see, I can think of even with Apple, like Bill Gates and Wozniak, there was pretty well noted like disagreements within their company as well. So I think they took a lot of inspiration from what's happened through a lot of technology firms and their stories in the development of this film. But anyway, so what were your overall thoughts on the film? Did you like it? Would you see it again? Would you recommend it?
Yeah, so my overall thoughts are kind of like the film isn't perfect because it's obviously his debut film, and actually you could argue there's never a perfect film. What I find impressive is like the budget, the story, and then also like how much time. It seemed like I don't have the the specific dates, but it seemed like there was more time spent on after shooting, like the editing and sound mixing and getting it all together, and then it was actually, like I said, shooting and writing the script actually, and I think that just having that context and makes it more impressive to me. I think overall I mean this is my take, that like the science stuff is important, but I think the theme is really more about how you like how do normal people, like engineers, like you're saying, that they're not like demigods or human, when they have like they come across a discovery, or let's say we speak in generic terms, power, how they handle it, right? Like if you think about, like, I'm going to the middle of the movie a little bit, but when they discover this power, the first thing they do is go and make money off the stock market, right? That's their immediate thought, right? It's not like, oh, we should go and avoid wars and stuff. It's literally to enrich themselves, and I think, like, even though the story might not seem like it has a solid fluidity and stuff, I think the director, like I said, and that's what I appreciate about certain directors is he's trying to explore human themes, right? Human nature, ambition, fear, and all the friendship and stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it to just everybody. Definitely people who are like, more curious about films, like the style, because I think you can learn a lot just about like how he shot it, how he edited it. And also, yes, I think people who are into time travel movies will like this one too. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit to what you were saying in terms of how they wanted to use the technology in the film. You can definitely see sort of the evolution as the film goes along, because at first they're not really sure what they necessarily created. They're trying to figure it out. They're testing it. They know it sort of freezes gravity, and that it freezes time as well. And they play around within it, and we'll get a little more technical throughout the rest of the remaining time of this podcast. But you could tell once they were first sort of getting the idea that it was starting to be a revolutionary thing, that their initial thing was like, well, we could publish. I remember like thinking, I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I mean, I'm coming from a scientific background, so a lot of people's sort of ambition is to publish. But then they actually use it and experience it, and then they realize, well, wait a second, we can, instead of using this to sort of publish and sharing this technology, we can just use it for our own beneficial gain. And they manipulated the stock market, or they were able to take advantage of the stock market, is more what I meant. And they were able to capitalize quite well. But then it sort of got into their heads that, well, you can use this for even bigger purposes, like trying to stop certain events. So things sort of got like more personal in terms of like the power. And they ended up, in a way, at least some of the characters, thinking that they could become like more like gods in a way and sort of change certain events for their own personal uses, not knowing that that could potentially have unintended consequences.
Yeah, and building off that, actually, if you think about it, if you remember, like, it seems like Abe and Aaron also have different, like, almost like takes on that, right? Like, Abe is very cautious. Like, once they start realizing that they have like kind of like a secret power, basically, which they do, Abe becomes kind of like more cautious and paranoid about it. While Aaron is like, wait, like we can start playing, like you said, like gods, and I think that's what leads a little bit to the friction of their friendship. And again, it's a time travel movie, so when I say friction, I mean like the versions that are like probably the ones that have been traveling back the most, because you'll later learn that there's multiple iterations. So,
yeah,
and like but it's those versions that have in the end like the breaking up, right? While like the ones that are not haven't done all those loops are still probably happy, and they're probably living more enjoyable lives. It goes back to that theme of like, is ignorance bliss? There's versions of Aaron and Abe that have no idea what they did.
Yeah, essentially, and that it gets pretty complex pretty quickly as you move along in the film. But I will say that at first, Aaron seemed a little bit cautious when he first goes and uses the machine, and he realizes sort of what's going on. he ends up going to the hotel and sort of chilling out because he didn't really want to. He was a little afraid about altering some of the timelines, so he wanted to stay away from people. He unplugged all of the phone lines, didn't take any cell phones with him, and just on a side note, the thing I found funny was just seeing these giant phones, because I definitely remember them when I was a little kid being that big. It's just been a while. But back to it, so he unplugged all of the technology because they didn't want any interference and wanted to make sure that they didn't alter any events that were going on within that timeline, sort of trying to prevent any butterfly effects, if you will. But as they went more along and continued to go back in time through different iterations, then that sort of, I would say, cautiousness sort of started to go away a little by little.
Yeah. Actually, going on the phone and the computer stuff, actually, Caruth does say that, like, because I also remember 2004-ish a bit, and like, yeah, some phones were like that, but the laptop scenes, like if you look at the laptop, a lot of laptops weren't like that in 2004. They actually were like that probably in like 99. And he actually admits that, like, he looked for older technology because he wanted to be a little more timeless. He felt like, you know, if he had picked something like the flip phones of 2004 or 2003, it might not have aged well, but like those bigger ones, like it gives it more of a timeless feel, which I think is actually like, to his credit, now watching it, like, was it like 16 years later? It has, like, I don't think of it as like, oh, that's so antiquated, you know, like I think it's going to age well, you know, like the props and devices he used. So.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely used technology within the time, but I think it still sort of resonated well there, sort of the way they shot the film, the structure. One thing that I found interesting watching the film, when they wanted to get through the sort of point that the device that they had made was, because it was two-pronged, right? It was, as I said before, it would sort of freeze gravity, and it would freeze time, or I'll let you go back in time for at least within a certain period. There was a specific shot where they were trying to test their machine, and you know, they sort of use magnetic fields within it, and that's what they're sort of worried about a lot. And so the camera at one point frames into a camera of them sort of shooting themselves, and you can see that they sort of put something in their device, and through the camera they give off that special effect of like anti-gravity. I thought that was a really cool sort of trick that they did, given the budget they were in.
Oh yeah, that scene where you see the second camera, he does say that's the only part of the movie that has special effects.
Yeah, you can definitely tell, and it was a very smart, cool little trick to use from a filmmaking standpoint, especially given the budget of being under like 10 grand is really amazing. I never really got the feel watching the film that it was shot on that small budget, because it really doesn't feel cheap to me.
I did feel that it was a small budget film, but I would never have guessed $7,000 though.
No, I mean, that's, in terms of filmmaking, that's like pennies, really. So
yeah, if I were to guess, I would have easily said like, oh, 50,000, 100,000, like one person's yearly, like a couple of years, like, well, that's gross tax, I guess, like, you know, a salary of a year or two, you know. But like this was like not even. A little tidbit
like
that you might be
chump change. But go ahead.
A little tidbit you might be interested in is that, like, the version we actually, I mean, we watched it online. So the versions we actually get to see because of the DVD copy is actually, they blew it up for Sundance. And the reason you see some grainy shots is that when they blew it up, that's what happened by accident.
Okay.
So I feel like so when he actually was like, you know, watching it over and over again before like getting it ready, he you know, it didn't even cross his mind that blowing it up would have had that effect. So
it's pretty interesting. I would say that it actually kind of gives it I'm trying to come up with the right word, almost like a more authentic feel, like you're with it for some reason, especially given that really didn't even cross my mind, the sort of graininess of it, because it was shot back in 2004 and on a small budget. So I already knew that going into the film. So I didn't really take anything away from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because it reminds me of how like a film. I forgot which director said this, but it's like a shared story, like a shared experience between the viewer and then the director and the creators. Because the creator has all these things in his head. Like you can see in his director's comment that he's like, oh, I'm not happy with this shot, this dolly shot, and the graininess here. But like as a viewer, like honestly, I'm with you. Like it didn't bother me that much. Like some things were out of focus, but like we said in the beginning of our intros, like I'm not like this NYU film critic, you know, like that's something that I know on a technical aspect, he knows he would have been kind of like grilled on. But like as a viewer, like I just saw it as part of like the timelessness of the film. So.
Well, I mean, whenever you're creating anything, you sort of, I feel like most of the time you judge your creation a lot harsher than even critics do, because there's some people that are just perfectionists. Especially with this being his first film, like we keep reiterating, I'm sure he wanted it to be as like up to par as he would want it. And you're always going to go back and look at certain scenes and be like, should have done this, I should have done that. But overall, yeah, it came across as a really pretty timeless film.
Yeah.
Especially for, at least in terms of indie films anyway. But yeah, anyway, so do you want to get into a little bit of what actually went on in the film? Because some of the sequencing is a little different. You want to get into a little bit about how the sort of timeline and the actual time traveling in the film works?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can even explain it that way. There's a great Wikipedia page that will try to explain it.
Yeah,
but,
so we'll definitely put on some links in terms of other explanation videos, but we want to give a little bit of context as to what actually went on in the film. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start at the beginning a little bit, where this film actually starts, like, even though it's confusing in the beginning because they're in the garage and they're saying all this scientific, kind of terminology. It's actually like very straightforward because they haven't done any of the time travel yet. So they're doing this. You get the feeling they're trying to build a company. Aaron, you learn that he has a wife, has a kid, and Abe, lives with I don't think it's really explained, but he lives like with a roommate or something like that. And he has a girlfriend too. And that they're getting money from Abe's, I think his girlfriend's father, right? Like I know that's discussed a little bit. And until you're right, until the time traveling hits. So and then you see the friction between the friend groups, and there's scenes of them working hard and stuff. Once again to the time traveling aspect, that's when it kind of gets to like, okay, what's going on now? There's 2 versions, now there's 3 versions. Now they're making money in the stock market. Now they want to change the past. But yeah, I mean, how I view it is like if I don't know if our audience will know, but like if you think of wormholes, it looks like the director took a lot of his inspiration from like how wormholes in theory and at the white paper academic physics level is supposed to work. That like if time is like, it's funny, he in the director's commentary does mention that the one thing that always bothers him about time travel movies is that they never explain space. They always say they go back, but if you know anything basic about Einstein and even quantum mechanics, like that space is as important as time. And he tries to explain the time aspect with the whole A and B. Like if you see the movie, they have a simple chart with A and B.
The loop.
The loop. You loop back by basically standing still in space, and then like you're letting time flow. Maybe you could do a better explanation, but I did find that like that's when he came to time travel, that was his gripe with all the movies. Is like they never explain space. They always say I go back, but like space is also intertwined with time if you know any basic physics.
Yeah, so I mean, just going off of that, for a lot of time travel movies I've seen probably about 3, something like that. Generally, within those films, you can go to any point in time in the past or sometimes the future, essentially. But that's not sort of the premise of this film or time traveling within this film, because it's a little more scientifically grounded. Really what they do is they create this device that can allow you to go back. But within this device, you can't go back to any point in time. You can only go back to any point in time essentially based on the earliest point in time that you can go back is to when the device was actually created. And you can't essentially go back to any point before then. And so what ends up happening a lot of times is they'll make this, within the sequence of the film, they'll make the device and then they'll use it and they'll go back, not when the device was created, but at some point within that. So they'll see a lot of the events that happen within the stock market or certain bond portfolios, and make a note of that and then go back, say, the day before and take advantage of that. And so that's an important distinction, because if you often wonder, well, why didn't they even go back before then? But that was sort of some of the dynamics that they incorporated within the sequencing of time traveling within the film. And the other important note is at a certain point, they end up making multiple devices all at once, multiple time traveling devices. So if you know, they'll have like at one sequence, they'll show you two devices that they made, and they made them at the same time. And so one for each person. But what one of the characters doesn't know, and this is where a lot of the deception and trust starts to sort of fall apart, is that one of them made a third time traveling box, and that ends up being their failsafe. Essentially, if anything goes wrong during the sequencing, so the two devices that they use in one of the storage units, that's for your day-to-day time traveling, right? If you want to think of it that way. But one of the characters makes another device in an adjacent locker so that if something goes horribly wrong in terms of their altering and they need to start over, he'll go to that device and go back to the original beginning portion. And so that was sort of interesting and unique because there's a lot of deception and a lot of the timelines start to get jumbled. But that's the sort of gist of the explanation, is that you can't go back prior to when the device that you're using was created.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job summarizing the time restriction. I think the other thing that's like a lot of time travel movies do that this one doesn't do, which I appreciate, is that and often all the other movies, like especially if you think of Marvel ones, where like they can just go back and forth, like back to the past and then back to where they were. But here, like once they go back, they're back. You know, like there is no like magic. Like they have to like they use the boxes to manipulate in a sense time, but like there's other copies of them, and there's no like. I'm thinking of like the recent Marvel ones where like, there is two versions of Captain America, but like, one can just hop back and it's like, there's like so many holes that you're just thinking like, this doesn't even make sense at this point, but you're just enjoying it,
Yeah. So I can't comment on the Marvel movies. I can't even remember the last Marvel movie I've actually watched. It's been a little while, a couple of years. It might've been Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's been at least 4 years or something.
That's a while.
Yeah. But anyway, getting away from that. Yeah. So, yeah, I thought it was the sort of timelines were kind of interesting, and the one thing I also really liked is they bring up the point because they're very cautious. They're not superheroes, so they're human. So they're very worried about not knowing what the unintended health consequences are of using this, right? Because if you think, you kind of freak out. What this kind of reminded me of is when you go in for like a CAT scan. And, there's radiation that you're subjected to when you go in for a CAT scan. They're going in and they're setting certain timers for how far they want to go back. But they have to, one, the machine uses argon, so it's in our atmosphere. Two, they have to carry in oxygen, and you're sort of warping sort of space and time that you're subjecting your body to. So you don't really know how that would sort of impact it. And there's a lot of different sort of physiological signs they give that show that extended usage of this machine can lead to like health consequences. You could see in one scene, the guy's, I believe it was Abe, his ear starts to bleed, and then you can see that they can't really write super well. That's evident when they show some of the notes that they start to take. But yeah, you could see some of the unintended consequences of using this beyond just affecting sort of timelines.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think one scene that captures, like the bleeding of the ear and the writing. But I think I remember the cell phone scene where like it rings and they're like, wait, if the same phone number is called, like who gets the call? Like they leave it like ambiguous, but like they're trying to get the viewer to think like, yeah, like these are the little things that are not really covered in most time travel movies. That like, there's two versions of Aaron and they both have the same cell phone, so. Do they both get the call, or do they only one of them gets the call?
Well, it depends how cell phone technology actually operates, right? And so they debate that.
And this was an interesting tidbit too, is that the director he actually called multiple cell phone companies to get the explanation on that, and he got each one gave him a different answer.
4 different answers.
So he just went with the one that like kind of like left it open to your imagination. So
yeah, and I mean, going along with like the rest of the film, I think a lot of it is meant to be somewhat open-ended, right? And it's for you to try to piece together. So that's the whole thing. When he gets a call twice within that sort of reality because he brings his cell phone with him. you're not sure if it's accidental, really, or he says it's accidental at first, but you don't really know at the end of the film.
Yeah, you start having suspicions that maybe nothing was accidental that he did.
You really don't know. Even the second time, you wonder if he was really just acting, right? If that, if he unintentionally brought it, or if he really intentionally brought it, and that sort of goes at the end of the film. Like gets more into that, and it gets very, very confusing and very meta in a way with some of their like topics that they bring up.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, so the one thing that I was a little confused on. I mean, I have my, I guess, own thoughts, but I was a little confused as to what went on with. I believe it was Aaron's. I can't remember her exact name if it was Rachel, but Aaron's lover who was supposed to be there, or love interest, who was supposed to be the.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, I'm trying to think of the name too. I thought Rachel was it. Yeah, whatever. It's the names never get said often. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing to keep track of them, but I'll try to describe the character. It's essentially Aaron, who is the a blonde character in the group. It's his sort of love interest father, who essentially is sort of like a venture capitalist, or said to be like a funding source in the film. But at one point, they are essentially going to be going to use their time machine late at night, but they notice that I believe I call the character Granger, the father, he is following them. And then there's some chasings, but you don't really know as to like what exactly happened or why he's following them, because it's sort of alluded to that he was had used one of their machines.
Yeah, I'm trying to double check this, but I think it's Abe is the blonde guy.
No.
No, you're right. It's Aaron is played by the director. I'm looking this up actually on IMDb. Right
really?
now. Yeah, and Abe is played by David Sullivan.
Okay, wait. So the blonde one is, I don't want to double check because I want to make sure I'm not confusing the characters. Aaron is the blonde one, or Abe is the blonde one?
No, Aaron is played by the director. I'm assuming you watched some interviews with the director. So that's Shane Carruth plays Aaron, and then Abe is the David Sullivan, which probably is the blonde one, right?
Yeah.
Because I saw him. Yeah.
I got them reversed. Then I apologize.
That's fine. I'd rather catch it earlier than later. So.
Yeah. No, I get it. But yeah, so that sort of sequence of like what's going on or why he's following him, that's never really explained. But my sort of own intuition is in one of the timelines, something went wrong at the party that's very important, and the father finds out because I'm sure his daughter is killed, and so he wants revenge and goes back to a timeline to try to seek revenge. I don't know if he got that necessary analysis or not out of that sequence too.
No, I think
it's hard, right? Because they leave that open.
Yeah, I really don't know either. Like, I feel like it's, like I said, it's very interpretive because, like, even though I think the time travel stuff is cool and it's important to the story, like I said, my takeaway from the movie was that it's about, individuals who, when they stumble into something amazing, they kind of squander it. And also they have both different takes on what they should do with it, right? Because at the end, Abe is just wants to make sure nothing else is disturbed with the I guess we'll call them version 2s or like, earlier versions of Aaron and Abe, while Aaron is like, I'm done with my old life, a new reality. I'm embracing what I can become, So I think depending on your like personal like experiences, your own personal life philosophy, you're either gonna be more sympathetic to Abe or you're gonna be more sympathetic to Aaron. So
yeah, I mean, it really shows the two differences in terms of the choices you want to make, because in the end, Aaron is played by Carruth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the end, Aaron ends up going to France. He chooses to leave his old life behind, whereas Abe chooses to stay and continue his life and try to make everything right, kind of deal.
Yeah, he's just watching over those. I guess we'll call them like earlier versions of Abe and Aaron. So
to make sure none of the destructiveness happens through the technology they use. So he ends up becoming more selfless, whereas the other character becomes selfish, right? And so I think that's sort of the overarching goal that they wanted to show, is that you can sort of have two different outcomes from this, or two directions that you go.
Yeah. The one thing I would say though is that like if I like you said, I think that, like you said, the themes were that at least that ending thing was clear. But the issue, the only thing I like nagged my brain at the end was okay. Abe is watching over the Aaron and Abe earlier like different versions, and Aaron like the one that went selfish route. He's building more boxes. That's what's hinted, right? So I'm thinking like I don't know how long Abe can actually protect him from Aaron because he seems like out of control, dude.
Hold on, I want to double check. Now I think I'm getting my characters mixed up, which is not ideal. I just want to make sure we're on the same page because I think I keep flip-flopping the two characters. Yeah, okay, so Aaron is, like you said, the director, so he ends up going to France, whereas Abe is the blonde one. He stays behind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Aaron is the one who goes to work with like as a consultant with the French firm at the end, or one of the Aarons, to make more devices, whereas Abe kind of is more cautious about the dangers of the technology.
Yeah, and it's really their two names are said the most because I'm looking at the cast and it's like Kara, I think, is the wife, and I think Rachel is Abe's girlfriend. And now it's clicking in my brain, but I'm like, I feel like I heard the word Kara like twice in the beginning. So
it's hard. I mean, some of the characters are because they don't really talk about their names a whole lot or mention them throughout the film, so it's very difficult to sort of keep track of that. But you can still recognize their faces. But in terms of the characters, it's kind of hard.
What I will say the style reminds me of. I felt when I was watching the movie, Alexis, I felt like I was actually like they say the whole fourth wall thing. I felt like I was just like somebody there. And I was just because nothing's ever explained to you really. They're just talking, they're acting in their own lives, and you're just really following.
It's like a day in their life kind of deal.
Yeah, you're getting like a snapshot, and like there's a narrator here and there that like gives these little like in-depth thoughts, but for the most part, it just feels like you're standing because like they don't really like you said, they say their names, barely. They just talk to each other as if like we do, like we know each other. So
yeah, I actually really like the idea of having the direction they went with having a narrator sort of appear throughout parts of the film, sort of giving little hints about like what was going on in their heads or what they did. And I think that's, I'm not sure, it's one of the characters obviously talking into a recorder for them to like play later on, because it's mentioned later in the film that it's very important to, I believe it was Aaron who actually started recording conversations before they went back in time so that he could play them in the ear so that they would happen accordingly so that none of the timelines would alter when he was actually revisiting them. So that was interesting. I think that was sort of something that they wanted to get across too from the narration standpoint. But yeah, I think overall I enjoyed this film. Like I said earlier, I definitely don't think this was necessarily for a film for everybody. If you like sort of more like trippy films, I could think of like Inception or things that really make you like thought provoke. I think this is definitely like I would say like a must see film if that's your sort of cup of tea.
I wanted to flip it on you in the sense that like, is there things in the film that kind of like you didn't like, or like it kind of jumped at you like, oh really, this is what we're doing, I'm
trying to think. I wish so. My one gripe, because I was a little confused. They mentioned at one point, and this is when things get a little more like going from just seamless, I guess, taking advantage, or I'm sorry, not seamless. What I would say when their motives switch from just trying to take advantage of trends in the stock market, and then they want to go a little more personal in terms of altering events. They mentioned a specific character named Platt, and they just sort of drop his name in, and it's not really mentioned as to like what exactly it is. It's more for you to sort of tease out. I didn't quite like that because they don't. That part kind of left me like really confused, and then I went and looked at some of the more like instant analysis. Turns out Platt, I don't know if you like know that much about that piece of the storyline, but he ends up it ends up being revealed that he's a former engineer, one of the five that essentially screwed them out of the technology, capitalized, made a lot of money, and left them in the dust. And so that's why he wants to like he talks about if I could do anything about going back on the timeline when it's Aaron, Abe, and Aaron's wife. He talks about Aaron is mentioning that yeah, the one thing I'd love to do is go up to his office, Platt's office, tell his secretary that I'm here to see him, and then just punch him in the face.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember the punch thing. But you're right. Like, yeah, I didn't think too much of the scene as in like, oh, like, you know, there's a guy that he really is mad at. But you're right. Like, there's more in depth history.
There's that context is never really specified, and it just seems like it's sort of a random outburst that I think sort of took away from some of the sequencing. I get what they were doing in that, like, it's sort of shifting from going from simple sort of, you know, stock market or taking advantage of the stock market for your own personal gain to more like, I want to do something more like physical, more personal, right, in alternate timelines. But it's never really discussed why, like, that sort of aspect. And I think that's important because in the creation of a lot of technologies, there is a lot of infighting and turmoil, and there are definite stories of people getting screwed over. So I thought they should have spent a little bit more time or a couple scenes just trying to add more context to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like the story is kind of like, I think most people would find it sort of confusing here in certain parts, right? And the flow sometimes.
Well,
yeah, I think go ahead.
I will say, just before you go on, I think a lot of it is left to be open-ended for your interpretation, but that little sequence is like just not mentioned at all, that it's really hard, even if you go back several times, to sort of tease out what exactly is going on there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of minor details that it's funny.
Yeah.
You know, Carruth does say like he knows in his mind. It's kind of like, you know how like you sometimes write a story and you know the like what are the motivations, but you don't maybe you don't articulate it or write it out very well in your whatever short story or paper. But like he admits that there's a lot of storylines that he knows the answers to, but is never explained in like actually the film. And that when he does Q&A sessions, he's always asked these kind of things because he realizes that he didn't really explain.
Does he divulge that information?
He actually, in the director's commentary, some of the scenes he does divulge, but it's only like an hour and like 15 minutes, so there's only like so much he can talk about. He does even say there's another commentary that he did with the crew, which I don't have a copy of that. That he actually explains it because he keeps every now and then he'll mention that, oh, I explained this in the crew commentary. I'm like, where is this crew commentary? Because I like to know the explanation here. So yeah, it's one of those films that, because you know how some directors say like, oh no, I didn't have any like deep meaning here. I want you to interpret it. It looks like he was, like you said, it was his first baby. So he actually, all the little things that you probably have questions for, he does have answers, it seems. So
yeah, I mean, I get some of the open-ended, but it is a very short film with a runtime of around, I think, an hour, 17 minutes. He could have included some more scenes just to sort of flush out some of those minor details, I feel like. And I think he wanted to keep it concise, just out of like a stylistic choice. But I think it would have been more beneficial if he would have added like 5 more minutes explaining certain scenes.
He didn't have the footage. I'm gonna see if I can ever get you a copy of this director's commentary.
I gotta check this out later.
But he explains like he just didn't have enough footage. It's crazy. I've never heard that before. Like, oh, I just didn't have enough footage. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, he had miscalculated. I guess he had, like, I'm not a director, but I guess he had miscalculated how much footage he actually needed versus like, you know, what he thought he needed.
So he burned through the cash, or like he didn't have enough cash to get more footage.
Yeah, because like he couldn't rent. So I remember him talking about how like if they had to shoot like certain scenes like really like terribly in his opinion because he couldn't afford to rent the camera another 10 days.
Right.
But and also like the footage, what he didn't realize, I guess, is he admits. I think there's a lot like to that line. It's loaded, but one thing he did mention was that when you're editing, he realized, I guess this is his first time doing a lot of editing, that you actually want your takes to be a little bit longer so you can splice in certain spots.
Yeah.
And he had just overlooked that, and you know, he was, you know, he even admitted like he needed every second of footage he could do just to get this version out. So, and then with the sound dubbing, he also said that like he admits that like there's certain sounds that are not natural. Like if you ever rewatch it, where he puts his hand into the bag of M&Ms, he says those aren't M&Ms. He just got a clip somewhere and put it like there. Like those aren't like actually Eminem sounds.
Oh, that's like a minor detail I didn't catch on to. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, it's there's other ones where like he points out like there's a random mini here of like somebody holding a sound mic, and I was just like, he points it out, and I'm just like pausing the movie because I can't notice, but I have to pause it and be, oh, it's right there. It's like the side. I'm like, oh my goodness, dude. That's when you know you're like a director that really knows your film, like even the bad parts. But yeah, he talks about how like he didn't like appreciate much how much sound matters in movies, when to play music, when to dub it, when to not dub it. And he learned like again, like as a film, I think as a creative, you always learn by doing, I think in many ways. Like even this like podcast, I think we're gonna learn a lot by just doing this 2 or 3 times. So but it was very intriguing how like, yeah, he admits that like he had, like you said, like didn't realize how much extra stuff he needed, and he was like, yeah, there was a point he even said like, I didn't know if I was ever going to release this movie because like I wasn't going to release a version I wasn't comfortable with, and I was running out of like footage. I was like, I've never heard that before because you hear like all these great directors talk about their movies and they have all the resources they need. So it was great to hear like, oh no, I actually like, I wish he said he shot 80 minutes of film and it's 78 because he cut some stuff out, but he needed every frame. Like I was just like, man, that's crazy.
That's wild. Yeah, I've never heard of another film that's gone through those sort of constraints before. That's really interesting. I wish now I had actually watched the director's commentary to get some of the more insight on like that scene you were talking about. I didn't catch a boom being in the frame anywhere. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he has to point it out. Like it's the sound mic is like right there, and he like if you're not pointing it out, I'm not noticing because he says, oh, it looks like a shadow, but it's really somebody's sound mic going like this. And I was just like laughing, like it's so funny.
That's interesting. I always find it whenever you catch certain like fails in films, I always find it kind of hilarious. I've only done that probably like 2 or 3 times, but every time it shows up, it's like that's not supposed to be there, but you can catch it.
It was like the Game of Thrones Starbucks cup controversy. For like, it's just an actor forgot to move their cup, or not, like, and the sister or whatever. That was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, I genuinely enjoyed this film, and I like I said, it's something that I definitely would recommend and even rewatch because it's surprisingly very rewatchable. Like think about it, when I watch the director's commentary, how it usually works with these director's comments that they talk over the film. So I in theory watched the film twice this week. So. Just one with the actual audio, and another one with the director's commentary. So
I saw it 2 times with some pausing in certain sequences just to be like, wait, I want to make sure I caught like what's going on there, more or less. But I didn't have a copy of the director's commentary, and I'm sure you gained quite a bit of insight just like seeing what he was trying to convey. I'm sure.
Yeah, I learned a lot about the filmmaking process, which I wouldn't say I'm like an expert, but I follow other YouTubers that talk about filmmaking, frame sets, and they usually talk about the technical aspects like frames and stuff. But he was talking about like, oh yeah, I ran out of footage. I didn't have the sound for this. I don't know where I was gonna get the sound for this. I was just like, man, that's a real filmmaking there. $7,000.
Well, that's tough. That's like when you're just starting out on the grind, right? When you don't have any resources. It's always interesting seeing like, I guess directors at sort of that point in their career, like when they first get started, because no one's like knows who you are. You don't have that name, so you just got to get by and make something that's really going to have an impact with like little to no resources, really. So, given the version that he sort of released, I thought it turned out pretty well. I mean, there's very few directors who could have made anything really this sort of timeless and still talked about within its cult following than this director could have. I think there's very few directors that could have.
Yeah, I think another tidbit you'll like is that you remember the basketball scene where he's talking to the guy to get like invited to the party, right? And they're shooting the hoop. So he talks about this, how like they were lucky enough to have, I think it's Sullivan's brother do the scene, but he didn't like the audio. So, and he was unavailable. So his brother actually dubbed the lines. So it's actually his brother's voice.
Really?
Yeah. The thing he told me,
I didn't catch that.
I mean, he didn't tell me, but like when you watch the director's comment, no, it's impossible to catch if you do really good dubbing. He was saying that like you can get it down almost perfectly, but he does admit that like you always prefer to do like sound, like to get the sound from the actual like scene and stuff. And yeah, you do some editing and fixing up later, but nothing will replace that. And I think him doing so much sound mixing, he probably like appreciates like film music, film audio and stuff. So
Yeah, so I'll sort of circle back to ask you this question since you already asked me. Is there anything that you wish he would have changed or done differently on the film? And I know that's a lot to ask for, especially because we didn't have to deal with the budget constraints that him and his crew did.
You know, the one thing, so I will say this, and this is again from the commentary. He admits that like he could have, when it got blown up, he could have actually. So the reason we have the grainy footage, so some of the shots that throw me off with the out of focus, and he admits they were just bad shots and he was rushing. But the graininess, I know you had a certain point about like it didn't bother you, but it threw me off because like you would have like a decent shot that I was getting used to with the footage she was using, and then suddenly it went like grainy. It just threw me off. I didn't think in my mind, and he confirmed it. I didn't think that he was like doing this on purpose, and like I wish he had like he admits that he could have made the release to the festival and then maybe gone back and had it reprocessed and redone. I wish he had done that, and like we would have a version that's like the version he saw. That's what kind of gets at me, like the version he was working with on his computer. I didn't get to see that version of it. That would have been nice to see, but
yeah, I'm sure it would have been cleaner, but I don't know. There was something that was almost like an organic feel about the sort of the graininess. It really didn't bother me as much as it sounds like it did you. But that's going to be like a personal preference for like the viewer. Some people are probably going to get annoyed with that. Some aren't.
Yeah, I just wish he would gone. Maybe because of the money, I wish he'd gone back and just given both versions. But what I did appreciate out of his stories were like, filmmaking is sometimes luck, or it's just sometimes happen chance. Like he didn't know that was going to happen, and it did. Actually, when he saw it in theaters, he was just like, "Wait, why is this so?
Why is it grainy?"
Yeah, why is this? Wait, what? This is the version I edited. Oh, and then the credits. He talked about the credits. It was funny how he talked about like he asked what they needed, and they just said they just needed like just a simple like slide, like graph slide, and he just like, oh, it's that easy. He's like, yeah, credits. We actually have an effect that does the rolling, so don't worry. And actually, there's a little joke in there. He says he gives credits to his parents that all food was provided by his mom and dad. If you actually read the credits, so
I mean, that's some good home cooking, though, I'm sure.
So no, I wouldn't say there's anything like too much I would change, because I think, having watched a lot of films and also like, follow tons of YouTubers now, you start seeing that like filmmaking is kind of like painting, where like you can have a picture in your head, but like there's always like these happen chance, these things that are out of your control that affect the art. And that's why like art is what it is, right? I think that's why like, we may, I think that's why we admire them in society, because great artists, like they don't grow on trees, and when I say great ones, I mean like ones that are like taking risks with their creativity versus just like, mailing it in and just, making like whatever budget movie that's, available to make a living, which I get it. We're living in a capitalist society. We need to make a living, but it was great to see like someone who really, you could tell like, he really cared about every aspect of the movie, right? Even when I didn't know anything, like I didn't watch the director's commentary first, so I just watched it like normal. But even then, I could tell that like, he cared about like every frame, in the sense of his constraints, right? But he really genuinely like cared deeply about the movie,
Yeah, I mean, I thought even given the budget that he had, I know we do like bring that up a lot, but it's just not really seen in a lot of films. He really, I think, wanted to go sort of outside the box with even certain angles. There is one that I could think of, and it was just like these cool little details that he was trying to like shoot, and I was like, oh, that's actually like nice, like from sort of a more like filmmaking standpoint. There's at one point where he's trying to show that the device doesn't need batteries to like run, and so he disconnects. This is Aaron disconnects the cables attached to the battery and kicks it, and then on the scene is cut, so you see from an aerial view the battery just showing up on the other side. Certain things like that just give like a cool effect, and I think made the film seem better than its $7,000 budget would indicate.
Yeah,
that was his sort of creative like outlook.
Another funny story he shares is like when they're filming at U-Haul, so he had to talk to the corporate, right? And corporate was like, this is not a pornographic film, right? And send us a script. So he sends them the script, right? But then he goes on site, and the people on site are like, we don't know why you're here. And he actually thinks that like just people are like his theory is that like because people are nice in general, but also like film crews don't just go there often to say I want to film. that they just like let it slide. But he was making fun of the fact that like there's a disconnect between corporate that gave me the okay and I'm going to this place, and they're like, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you going?
I mean,
and he said it happened to him at like most of the locations. That he would get it cleared with corporate, and then he would go there, and they'd be like, "Why are you here?"
Oftentimes, there's a lot of disconnect between corporate and just franchises in general. I'll give you a little sort of story that is kind of similar to that. So there, back in our hometown of San Jose, there is an auto shop. I won't name names, but the corporate location or the franchise location there gave the okay to this taco truck that they could set up and sell food there in their parking lot. And I'm sure they would pay him something. But apparently someone from corporate flew down and was doing a check on that franchise location, saw the taco truck and kicked them out saying, you can't do that. This is not against like corporate rules. So oftentimes there is like a pretty big disconnect between what corporate would okay or be cool with and what each individual franchise would.
Yeah.
But
no,
anyway.
I thought it was funny. Like, it just shows you how like down to earth the process of making the movie was. That it wasn't like, oh, I'm in LA, I have like Studio 55 booked and we're filming there. It's like I'm going on site and I'm talking to the manager. The manager's going, why are you here? And why are you with the camera? And then how people are vicious, they'll be like, wait, what's going on here? Like, it's just an investigation, but no, he's just a filmmaker. And he just had a good laugh about that. Even at the airport, you remember the airport scene? He talks about how like, he's pretty sure they had no permission. He just started shooting there. So I thought that was funny too. I was just like, man, this is truly like filmmaking at its almost purest in a sense.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? I think the only thing that is similar, and I know this is a bad analogy, but it's just something that just came to my head. Kind of reminds me of like that sort of on the fly sort of feel that Borat was kind of shot in, if you will. This is just like me personally because he'd just be going and he didn't want to sort of like acknowledge in certain scenes as Sacha Baron Cohen that that it was basically like staged. Like he wanted to give sort of like a more authentic feel, so he did certain things on the fly.
Yeah, I know what you're saying because I remember that film and that style. But I will say that you could. This is why I say like I know that Carruth cared about this film deeply because he's sharing these stories. But honestly, I would never have guessed. Like with Borat, like I know it was a big budget, but if you told me, oh, it was on 20,000, he's just going around with a camera and just talking to people, I'd be like, I can buy that. But you could tell that he tried to like make everything look like professional and like the best he could. Yeah. And so I would never have guessed that like we're just filming here, we're doing the scene and like the flight attendants are just in the scene and we're pretty sure we have no permission, so we're worried that if we get caught we're gonna be in big trouble because this is after 9/11 and they have a camera in there. So
more what I'm saying is like in a lot of scenes in Borat they actually weren't allowed to or they didn't have permission to shoot a lot. So Sacha Baron Cohen, the actor, said, I think I can't remember the exact amount, but he said there were over like 100 arrests made throughout like the making of that film. And more what I'm saying is, it was sort of that on the fly mentality. Now with this film, they wanted to make it look professional, whatever, but there was still the chance that they could get in trouble for it without having like anybody's permission.
Yeah.
So I think overall the film was good. What would you rate it like if you had to?
Out of like what, 10 or?
Yeah, we'll go on a 10-point scale.
Before we get into that though, I think watching this and like doing my own little research, superficial, I realized why this is a like a cult classic and has a following because the movie is not perfect, and I would never give it like a 10 out of 10, but there's enough conversation around the movie that you could talk about this. We could have another episode about this movie. That's what I think was good about this movie. If I had to give it a rating, I would definitely say it's a solid 7 out of 10. If we're doing decimals, I would say like 7.5 out of 10. So,
given again that it was sort of an indie film this first time, I'd probably give it around an 8 to 8.5 out of 10. Just based on what he was able to do with those constraints, because I think that context has to be like factored in. Because if he had like even say 30K more, I think he could have like made a lot of scenes and some of the storyline way better too.
But to give you a counter argument on that, if he had more money, would it really be the same movie? So it's like I feel like sometimes a movie's so independent of like its budget, its space, its time. Like it's like each movie is kind of its own like
yeah, it's got its feel. I get what you're saying.
So
yeah, I mean that's a debate, right? Would it really change the feel of it if he had edited or added more scenes?
Yeah.
Truth be told, no one really knows. That's pretty open ended.
Yeah, exactly. And would we enjoy it as much or be talking about it as much? So I think it's kind of like one of those things where like it was a moment in time where he was a younger, I guess he's not that old, but a younger director, and like you said, it's his first movie. And I think sometimes it's hard to recreate that first match, right? It's hard to recreate that first job, that first like experience.
You could totally tell he was kind of learning on the fly as he went along too. So
exactly, and he admits that. So I think that's what also makes the movie kind of special too, is that it has these imperfections in it too. I think.
Right.
I think sometimes we say always we were looking for perfection, but I think we love also the human fallibility, but how a human can overcome a bit too. I think that's what's also attractive to, I think, us, like what we like to see usually, right?
Right.
Just think about it, like, why is it that people are put off like characters that, oh, they already are smart, they already are powerful, there's no challenge for them, right? We don't like that's not character development for us. We're like, well, this movie's like garbage. Why did I even come and watch this when the character literally was the same as they started,
Yeah.
So I think even in life, like I would push back just a little bit that like, even with more money, I don't know if it would be the same movie. We would love it as much. So.
Yeah, no, I get that. Just given how it turned out, yeah, I thought he did a good job, man.
Yeah, it's definitely not like, I'm not saying like this movie's like a 2 out of 10. That's for other type of movies. Which I don't think we're ever going to review here because I don't want to waste my time on those movies.
You could watch what's the film that's considered like the all-time worst? I think it's called The Room, that was made in 2003.
I tried watching that. It was terrible.
Yeah,
I couldn't even get through it. And I know that people say like, oh, you're just not getting it, and like it's just have to think of it as terrible. But I was just like, okay, there's bad movies and there's movies that just like look like it was just randomly spliced together. But and that's also a cult following. So I mean, people do like watching it just because it's such a bad movie.
Yeah, I personally know someone that likes the film.
But what I will say is that, even though I can't get engaged with that movie, I will say that at least that film, it's unique enough where I think it deserves its recognition. I think the worst thing a movie can be is basically like forgotten, like in basically like T-minus 30 minutes after you watch it. Like all those random comedies, rom-coms, like you watch it and you enjoy it during the time and maybe talk about it with whatever, your girlfriend or friends afterwards, but then like a day later you're like, oh, what movie we watched yesterday? I don't remember, At least with The Room, it was so shockingly bad that I'm definitely gonna remember like the first half I saw now. So
yeah, it's kind of like when you you expect when you go out to eat, you get good service, and you get pissed when you like get bad service. But sometimes it's so bad. Like there's one experience I had, it was so bad you can like never forget it. And it's just like funny and it sticks in your head. It's kind of like that.
So it's like you want to be either really great, which is what most directors want to be, or if you're really bad, you also stand out. So it's when you're in the middle where like you're in this average bad film, like I'm not going to remember. Like there's probably so many movies that I probably don't remember. Yeah. I think that's the worst. I think that's the worst. I think if you make a really bad movie, I think it's to your credit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about longevity, I don't think anyone will be forgetting like The Room anytime soon. It's still mentioned as like the worst film of all time on certain lists. Yeah. So you're known for something.
If whoever's listening, you can watch it for free on YouTube too. So
there you go. But yeah, is there anything else that you want to touch upon?
No. I think I will say that for our first podcast, this went pretty well actually. So I think I'm looking to see what the feedback is and how we can iterate and improve. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is our first time. We have like no sort of podcasting experience prior to this. We're just trying to like learn as we go along. So I'm sure this hasn't turned out super perfectly. But yeah, if any of you out there want to recommend us certain films or want us to touch upon it, just let us know. Comment down below. And be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed our commentary. And yeah, we'll be trying to post probably about one episode a week. So take care.